Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Tagalog Time with Pat. This is episode 3, and we will be learning how to conjugate Tagalog verbs in the present tense. I encourage you to go back and watch episode 1 and 2 if you have not watched them yet. I have planned these episodes to kind of start from scratch. So if you don't know any Tagalog at all, start with episode 1 to learn about just the fundamentals of Tagalog, learning about basic phrases and everything like that. And then episode 2 will focus on how to use po so that you can be respectful when you're speaking to adults or to authority. And then now episode 3, this is more heavy on the grammar side so that we can start speaking more kind of simple sentences which you can use in a conversation. So let's go ahead and jump right in. In Tagalog, have you ever wanted to say something like, I am eating, she is sleeping, they are cooking? So basically anything in the present tense. If you've ever wanted to talk about what you are doing in this moment in time, or talk about what someone else is doing right now, this is a good episode to watch so that you can learn how to make these sentences to describe what you are doing currently. And this is our agenda for today. We will start by talking about verb conjugation in general. Then we will learn the Tagalog verb types. Then we will go into Tagalog pronouns so that we can start making simple sentences. And then we will learn the verb conjugation patterns and then practice them in some example questions. And then I will finish it off with a Taglish tip, which I think you will find very useful. So what is verb conjugation? First of all, a verb is an action word. So to run, to play, to jump, any kind of movement or action, that is a verb. And to conjugate means to change into a different form. So when we speak, we are constantly conjugating verbs depending on what we're trying to say. If we are talking about something that happened yesterday, we conjugate the verb in the past tense. If we are talking about what we will be doing tomorrow, we conjugate the verb in the future tense. So to conjugate just means to change into a different form. And I like to take the time to kind of explain what conjugate means because one time in a class, I had a student ask, what does conjugate mean? And here I was just throwing the word around thinking everyone knew what it meant. So I like to just kind of go start at the basics and just explain what a verb is and what it means to conjugate it. Now, there are many different types of verb tenses. In English specifically, there's a whole bunch. The most common ones are the present tense, like what you're doing right now, past tense, what you did yesterday or last week, future tense, what you will be doing tomorrow or next month. Then in English, there are also lots of other tenses like the present perfect tense, like I have been to his house before. So that means like something happened in the past, but it's still kind of related to the present. Then there's the pluperfect tense. I had eaten lunch. So that's something that happened in the past. It's done. It happened at a specific moment in time. And then there are just so many more verb tenses out there, especially in English. But in today's class, we will focus on how to conjugate verbs in the present tense. Alrighty, so in Tagalog, there are 5 main types of verbs in Tagalog. Mag, ma, in, and e verbs. Now, what makes them different is that some verbs are actor-focused and some are object-focused and some are both. So what does that mean? An actor-focused verb means that the subject is doing the action. For example, the boy is playing. Here, the subject is the boy and he is doing the action. He is playing. Whereas in an object-focused verb, the action is being done to the subject. For example, wash the dishes. Here, the subject are the dishes, and they are being washed. So the action is being done to the subject. So that's the difference between an actor and an object-focused verb. And the difference between them will be important when we are determining the type of sentence that we're going to make. So we'll see that more in the examples later on. Alrighty, so speaking of subjects, let's learn some subject pronouns. Ako means I, Ka means you singular, so it's just you by yourself, one person. Siya means he or she. And I want to point out that siya is gender neutral. That means you have to listen for the context of the sentence to determine who that person is talking about. And also, take a look at the spelling. It looks like it should be pronounced siya, but it's actually pronounced siya, siya. There are some regions in the Philippines that might pronounce it siya, but for the most part, in the central Luzon, Tagalog-speaking areas, it's pronounced siya, siya. Next, sila is they. Tayo is we inclusive. Kami is we exclusive. So in Tagalog, it's interesting. There are two types of we. In English, we just say we, and then you have to kind of distinguish who you're talking about, like we who. So in Tagalog, if everyone is included, that's tayo. So you and me and everyone in the room, we are all eating, kumakain tayo. That's inclusive because everyone is doing the action. Whereas if it were me and my husband Chris, we are eating, that would be kumakain kami. That's exclusive because you're not included. I'm just kind of telling you about it. Kumakain kami, we are eating. And then lastly, kayo is you plural. So you all, that's you plural, kayo. Okay, now the simplest sentence structure is verb plus pronoun. If we take a look at the verb to cook, in Tagalog it's magluto. So if you want to say I am cooking, it's nagluluto ako. Or you could say nagluluto ka, you are cooking. Nagluluto siya, he or she is cooking. Nagluluto sila, they are cooking. Nagluluto tayo, we are cooking, inclusive. Again, that's you and me and everyone in the room. We are all cooking together. Everyone is included. Nagluluto tayo. Versus nagluluto kami. Me and my husband Chris, we are cooking. That's exclusive. And then nagluluto kayo, you all are cooking. Maybe you all as a class, nagluluto kayo. All right, so all of these examples just show the simple sentence structure, verb plus pronoun. So the verb goes first, and then the pronoun goes afterwards. It's the opposite of English where the pronoun goes first. Like, I am cooking, I is the pronoun, and then it's the verb cook. So in Tagalog, it's the opposite, verb plus pronoun. All right, so one important thing about Tagalog verbs is that they all have a root word, and then something is added to them to conjugate it to a different tense. So an affix or an infix is added to the word to change it into a different tense. For example, let's take a look at the word magluto, to cook again. You could say nagluluto ako, I am cooking. That's the present tense. Past tense, nagluto ako, I cooked. Future tense, magluluto ako, I will cook. So I underlined here all of the root words. So luto is the root word. And then there's the affix that goes before the root, and that will determine the tense. And what I want you to get from this slide is that if you can pick out the root word in a conversation, then that will really help with the translation of Tagalog for you. So if I heard someone say, oh, nagluto ako kahapon, then I would say to myself, okay, I know luto means to cook. Now I have to use context clues to figure out, are they talking about something that happened yesterday, or are they cooking right now, or are they going to cook tomorrow? So if you can pick out root words when you're listening to Tagalog, that will really help with the translation and understanding of the language. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and jump right into these conjugation patterns. We will start with the mag verbs. They are usually actor focused, and they are the most common type of verb in Tagalog. Here are some examples. Maglakad, to walk. Magluto, to cook. Magbasa, to read. Now, in the present tense, if you want to conjugate a mag verb in the present tense, here is the pattern. It's the affix nag, then it's the repeated first syllable, and then it's the root. For example, maglakad becomes naglalakad. Here's the affix nag, then there's a repeated first syllable, and then the root. Naglalakad ako, I am walking. Naglalakad sila, they are walking. Alrighty, let's take a look at magluto, to cook. In the present tense, it becomes nagluluto. Here's the affix nag, then there's the repeated first syllable, and then the root. Nagluluto sila, they are cooking. Nagluluto. Lastly, magbasa, to read. It becomes nagbabasa. Here's the affix nag, then there's a repeated first syllable, and then the root. Nagbabasa ako, I am reading. So that is how you would conjugate a mag verb in the present tense. Let's take a look at ma verbs. They are very similar in their pattern. These are usually actor-focused, and here are some examples. Maligo, to shower. Matulog, to sleep. Manood, to watch. In the present tense, if you want to conjugate a ma verb, here's the pattern. Now the affix is na, then it's the repeated first syllable and then the root. So maligo, to shower, will be naliligo. Naliligo ako, I am taking a shower. Naliligo siya, he is taking a shower. You jot it down on your paper. What do you think matulog and manood will be in the present tense? And feel free to pause the video if you need. All right, matulog in the present tense, to sleep, is going to be natutulog. The affix is na, then there's a repeated first syllable, and then the root. Natutulog ako, I am sleeping. Natutulog. Manood, to watch, will be nanonood. Nanonood sila. They are watching. Affix is na, then there's a repeated first syllable, and then the root, nanonood. So mag and ma verbs have a very similar pattern. The only difference is that affix in the beginning. Now let's take a look at verbs. These can be actor or object focused, depending on the context. And here are some examples. Kain is to eat. Takbo is to run. Tawa is to laugh. Now you might be wondering, why are these verbs? Doesn't appear in the word at all. It's because is the infix that goes into the word when you are conjugating it. So in the present tense, to conjugate an verb, the infix goes between the first and second letter, and then it's the root at the end. So for example, kain, to eat, becomes kumakain. Goes between the first and second letter, and then you add the root at the end. Kumakain ako. I am eating. Kumakain ako. Next, takbo means to run. In the present tense, it would be tumatakbo. Tumatakbo siya. He is running. Goes between the first and second letter, and then it's the root at the end. Tumatakbo. You jot it down. What do you think tawa will be in the present tense? And just use the pattern we learned. In the present tense, tawa, to laugh, will be tumatawa. Goes between the first and second letter, and then the root goes at the end. Tumatawa sila. They are laughing. Tumatawa. Alrighty, now let's move on to verbs. These are also object focused. And here are some examples. Gamit means to use. Walis means to sweep. It has a very similar pattern to verbs. The only difference now is that the infix in goes between the first and second letter, and then it's the root. So gamit, to use, in the present tense becomes ginagamit. In goes between the first and second letter, and then it's the root. Ginagamit ko. I am using something. Ginagamit. What do you think walis will be in the present tense? Remember to just use the pattern and plug everything in. Walis in the present tense is winawalis. So in just goes between the first and second letter, and then the root goes at the end. Winawalis ko yung sahig. I am sweeping the floor. Winawalis. Lastly, e-verbs. These are object-focused. Some examples are isara, to close, ibigay, to give, itago, to hide. And now the pattern is the infix in goes between the second and third letter, and then it's the root. So isara, to close, becomes isinasara. Isinasara. So in goes between the second and third letter, and then the root goes at the end. Isinasara ko yung pinto. I am closing the door. You jot it down. What do you think ibigay and itago will be in the present tense? In the present tense, ibigay, to give, will be ibinibigay. Ibinibigay. In just goes between the second and third letter, and then it's the root at the end. Ibinibigay. So, ibinibigay ko, I am giving something to someone. Lastly, itago, to hide, in the present tense will be itinatago. Itinatago. The in just goes between the second and third letter, and then the root goes at the end. Itinatago. All right, so those are the conjugation patterns for the 5 different types of verbs in Tagalog. So as you can see, there are some similarities among the patterns. You just kind of have to figure out what type of verb it is and then go from there. So I always get asked, how are verbs categorized? Why are some verbs mag, some are ma, some are some are in, some are e? And I've looked it up, and honestly, I have not found a consistent answer for that question. I think it goes back to baybayin, the ancient Philippine script. And back in the day, all of these verbs were just organized into these categories, and it was passed down throughout the years. And as Tagalog has evolved over time, all of these verbs have just been accepted into these categories. Unfortunately, there is no rhyme or reason that I know of to explain why magluto is a mag verb, whereas matulog is a ma verb. I'm not quite sure why they were organized like that. But my biggest tip is to really listen when a native Tagalog speaker is conjugating these verbs, and then make a note of that so that you can conjugate it that way in the future. So it's just a matter of acquiring more vocabulary and then using the verbs in those ways in the future. Now, if anyone does know the answer to that, like why are verbs organized in these groups, please let me know because I would love to share it. I have not been able to find a consistent answer to explain why they are the way they are. All right, so now let's go ahead and practice. I'm going to go ahead and turn my video off so that I can use the whole screen. All right, so in this top left corner are the verb patterns that we just learned. Under that are the subject pronouns we learned. Ako is I, ka is you, siya is he or she, sila is they, tayo is we, inclusive, kami is we, exclusive, kayo is you, plural. Then here is the simple sentence structure, verb plus pronoun. And then here are some vocabulary terms to indicate present tense. So ngayon means right now. Ngayong araw means today. And here are some examples. So number 1, I am cleaning right now. Maglinis means to clean. Number 2, she is eating. Kain means to eat. Number 3, you all are cooking. Magluto means to cook. Number 4, we are walking. Maglakad, inclusive. Number 5, they are sleeping. Matulog. And number 6, we are watching TV. Manood exclusive. So let's do number 1 together just so we are all on the same page. Remember our sentence structure here, verb plus pronoun. So the verb for to clean is maglinis. In the present tense, it's naglilinis. So mag verbs, remember the pattern is affix nag, then there's a repeated first syllable, and then the root. Naglilinis, then I, the subject pronoun for I is ako. And then right now, ngayon. Naglilinis ako ngayon. I am cleaning right now. Naglilinis ako ngayon. You take a minute and do the last 5 questions and then we'll go over it. And feel free to pause the video now if you think you'll need more time. All right, so let's go ahead and do number 2. She is eating. Kumakain siya. Remember, kain is an verb. So the pattern for verbs is the infix goes between the first and second letter, and then it's the root. Kumakain siya. Number 3, you all are cooking. Nagluluto kayo. Nagluluto kayo. Number 4, we are walking. Naglalakad tayo. So remember, inclusive means everyone is doing the action. Tayo is the inclusive form of we. Number 5, they are sleeping. Natutulog sila. Natutulog sila. And lastly, we are watching TV. Exclusive. Nanonood kami ng TV. So not everyone is doing it. It's just me and someone else. Nanonood kami ng TV. So the TV just goes at the end. Nang means some or a thing. We are watching some TV. Now, I want to take a look at this phrase, she is eating. Kumakain siya. Kain is a good example of a verb that can be actor or object focused. So we just learned, kumakain siya. She is eating. But you could also say, kumakain siya ng kanin. She's eating some rice. Or kumakain siya ng saging. She's eating a banana. So ng can mean some or a thing. And in all of these examples, kain is being conjugated as an verb. But you could also say, kinakain niya yung cake. She is eating the cake. Or, kinakain niya yung pandesal. She's eating the pandesal. Pandesal is like a sweet bread that's usually eaten for breakfast. So these last 2 examples, kain is being conjugated as an verb. What's the difference here? When kain is being conjugated as an verb, it is an actor-focused verb. So in these examples, it's like asking, what is she doing? Oh, she's eating. She's eating some rice. She's eating a banana. What is she doing? Versus when it's an object-focused verb, it's almost like you're asking, what is she eating? Oh, kinakain niya yung cake. She's eating the cake. Or kinakain niya yung pandesal. She's eating the pandesal. So when it's an actor-focused verb, it's more answering the question, what is she doing? In an object-focused verb, it's like answering the question, what is she eating? So there you can kind of see the shift in the focus of the sentence. Is it more focused on what the subject is doing or focused on what the subject is eating? So I think that's very interesting how the verbs can take on a different kind of focus depending on the context of your sentence. All right, so let's go back to the examples we just did. If you look closely, you'll notice that all of these examples are mag, ma, or verbs. That is because they are all actor-focused, meaning you can use a subject pronoun like we were using. However, if you want to use an in or e verb, now you have to actually use a possessive pronoun. And the idea here is that For in or e verbs, since the object is the focus of the sentence, it's almost like you are in possession of that object, so you have to use these possessive pronouns. So let's take a look down here in the bottom left corner. Here are possessive pronouns. Ko means my or I. Mo means your or you singular. Niya means her or his, he or she. Nila means their or they. Natin means our or we inclusive. Namin means our or we exclusive. Ninyo means your or you plural. So you might be wondering, how can it mean my or I, your or you? Because you can use these pronouns in different ways. So you could say like, bahay ko, my house, or bahay mo, your house. So when you're attaching it to an object, it takes on the possessive quality of like my or your or his or her. But when you're using it in a sentence with an object-focused verb, then it takes on the translation of I, you, he or she. So now this is the sentence structure we will be using when we use an in or e verb. Verb plus pronoun, like we were just doing. Then it's the word yung, and then it's the noun. A very similar word is ang, A-N-G. That also means the. However, yung is specific. It's like that thing. So for our purposes, let's just use yung because it's a little bit more specific to the examples we will be going over. And then again, here are some vocab words to indicate present tense. Ngayon means right now. Ngayong araw means today. And here are some examples. I am using the car, and I gave you some vocabulary words. Gamit means to use. Coche is car. Number 2, he is closing the door. Isara means to close. Pinto means door. Number 3, you all are sweeping the floor. Walis means to sweep. Sahig means floor. Number 4, they are hiding the toys. Itago means to hide. Mga laruan means toys. So this is interesting. If you want to make a noun plural, you have to add the word mga in front of it. It's not like in English where you just add an S at the end. To make a noun plural, you have to add this word mga. So let's do the first one together. Just so we're on the same page, keep an eye on your new sentence structure here, verb plus pronoun, then yung, then the noun. So I am using the car. Gamit is to use. In the present tense, it's ginagamit. Remember, the in just goes between the first and second letter, and then it's the root. Ginagamit, and then the pronoun I in the possessive pronoun is ko. And then yung car is coche. Ginagamit ko yung coche. I am using the car. Ginagamit ko yung coche. So as you can see, we just kind of plugged everything into this sentence structure. And then we also used the pattern that we learned for these different types of verbs. So go ahead and take a minute. You do the last 3 examples and then we'll go over it. Feel free to pause the video if you need. All right, let's do number 2. He is closing the door. Isinasara niya yung pinto. Isinasara niya yung pinto. So the pattern for e verbs, the in just goes between the second and third letter, and then it's the root. He, as a possessive pronoun, is niya. Yung pinto, the door. Number 3, you all are sweeping the floor. Winawalis nyo yung sahig. Winawalis nyo yung sahig. And then lastly, they are hiding the toys. Itinatago nila yung mga laruan. Itinatago nila yung mga laruan. So it really is just a matter of plugging everything into the sentence structure and then using the patterns that we learned for these different verbs. And the trickiest part really is trying to remember that for actor-focused verbs like magma and verbs, you can use subject pronouns. But then for in and e verbs, you have to use possessive pronouns. And again, it's because it's almost like you or the subject are in possession of that object. Alrighty. So let's take a look at this verb walis. This is another example of where it can be an actor or object-focused verb. We learned, winawalis ko yung sahig. I am sweeping the floor. That's an in verb. The focus is on the object, sahig. What are you sweeping? I'm sweeping the floor. Winawalis ko yung sahig. But you could also say, nagwawalis ako. I am sweeping. Now the focus is on me, the subject. I am sweeping. What are you doing? I'm sweeping. So here, when it's an in verb, it's an object-focused sentence. Versus when it's a mag verb, it's an actor-focused sentence. So very interesting there. Alrighty, let's finish it off with this Taglish tip. Taglish is Tagalog and English together. And I am a big supporter of using Taglish. There are people out there who might say, oh, don't use Taglish. That's a bad way to learn a new language. On the contrary, I think it's a great way to learn a language because you can use it as a stepping stone while you get more vocabulary. So you don't want to rely on Taglish forever. The idea is that hopefully over time you can get more vocabulary and learn how to say the whole phrase in Tagalog. But in the meantime, let's learn this Taglish tip, and I think you can use it every day. So let's take a look at these examples. I am driving. She is swimming. They are jumping. We didn't learn how to say to drive, to swim, or to jump. We didn't learn those verbs. But you could always turn them into a mag verb. So mag plus the English verb. And then you could just conjugate it in the present tense using the pattern we learned. Affix is nag. Then there's a repeated first syllable and then the root. And then use the subject pronouns like we learned. So what if for number one, I said, I am driving, and I told you to use the verb mag-drive. Now you could conjugate it as nagda-drive ako. So you see there's the affix nag. Then there's a repeated syllable, more like a repeated sound. And then there's the root. Nagda-drive ako. I am driving. Nagda-drive ako. I know it's kind of funny. It's like, is this even allowed? But honestly, I hear this phrase a lot. It's like, oh, sorry, I can't pick up the phone right now. Nagda-drive ako. I am driving right now. Next, she is swimming. What if I told you to use the verb mag-swim? How would you say that in Taglish? In Taglish, you could say, nagsiswim siya. So the affix is nag, then there's the repeated first syllable, and then the root. Nagsiswim siya. Lastly, they are jumping. What if I told you to use the verb mag-jump? How would you write they are jumping in Taglish form? In Taglish, you could say, nagja-jump sila. They are jumping. Nagja-jump sila. So the affix is nag, then there's a repeated first syllable or sound, and then the root. Nagja-jump sila. So I think this tip is useful, but again, try to go back later on and try to figure out what that word is in Tagalog so that you can say the whole phrase in Tagalog. So to drive in Tagalog is magmaneho. So nagmamaneho ako. I am driving. To swim in Tagalog is lumangoy. So lumalangoy siya. She is swimming. And then to jump in Tagalog is talon. Tumatalon sila. They are jumping. So try using Taglish whenever you can because I think it's a great way to practice using the sentence structure. You also get to practice using the different pronouns, and also it's a way to practice the conjugation patterns that we learned. And then also, of course, it's a good way to gain vocabulary when you go back and look up what these words actually are in Tagalog. Alrighty, so here's just a quick recap of everything we learned today. We went over a lot of information. First, we talked about what it means to conjugate a verb. Then we talked about the 5 different types of Tagalog verbs, mag, ma, in, and e verbs. Then we talked about different Tagalog pronouns, so subject pronouns for actor-focused verbs, and then possessive pronouns for object-focused verbs. Then we learned the different conjugation patterns for all of these verbs and even did some practice questions. And then we finished it off with a Taglish tip, which I hope you can start using in a conversation. I encourage you to go back and rewatch this video if you would like, because I know it'll take some time to kind of learn and understand the different patterns and how they are used throughout a conversation. Maybe go back and try doing the practice questions again. And then, of course, try using the Taglish tip that I taught you so that you can start using a little bit of Tagalog every day. And if you would like some more Tagalog resources, please find me on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. I post shorter videos throughout the week that will help you learn Tagalog on the go. Also, check out my Stan store because sometimes I have group classes going or other resources on there that might be helpful to you. Lastly, feel free to check out my Amazon storefront because I have a whole list of Tagalog learning books that I think are very useful. There are some in there that are very comprehensive with some practice quizzes and assessments, and then there are some that are quick and easy reads that will help you learn Tagalog very quickly. So feel free to check out those other resources that I put together for you. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. Keep an eye out for the next Tagalog lesson where I will be teaching how to conjugate verbs in the past tense and the future tense. And I think it will go a little bit quicker if you were able to follow along with this lesson because now it's just a matter of learning a new pattern and learning new infixes and affixes. Wherever you are in your Tagalog learning journey, I am here to support you. So thank you so much. I'll see you in the next episode. Paalam! Hello everybody. Welcome to another episode of Tagalog Time with Pat. This is episode 4 and today we're going to be learning how to conjugate verbs in the past and future tense. So this is actually a continuation of episode 3 where we learned how to conjugate verbs in the present tense. So I highly encourage you to go back and watch episode 3 where I go over what it means to even conjugate a verb, just giving an overview of Tagalog verb types and everything like that. And then also some practice and conjugation patterns on how to conjugate verbs in the present tense. So since this is kind of a continuation, I encourage you to go back and watch episode 3 if you have not watched it yet, because we will be building upon those ideas that we've already learned so far. Okay, so in Tagalog, have you ever wanted to say something like, I ate something earlier today, or she slept early? So anything in the past tense. Or have you ever wanted to say something like they will cook something, or we will use something? So things in the future tense. If you ever wanted to say things about the past or the future, this is the episode for you. So here's the agenda for today's lesson. We will do a quick review of the Tagalog verb types. Then we will talk about Tagalog pronouns so that we can make simple sentences. And then we will review very briefly the present tense conjugation of verbs. Then we'll jump right into the past tense conjugation patterns and then the future tense conjugation patterns and then some practice questions throughout as well. And then we'll finish off with a Taglish tip, which I think you will find very useful. Alrighty, so there are 5 main Tagalog verb types in Tagalog: mag, ma, in, and e verbs. And what makes them different is that some are actor-focused, like mag, ma, and and then some of these verbs are object-focused, like in, and e. So you can see that the verbs, some of them can be actor or object-focused, depending on the context of the sentence. And again, in lesson 3, I go over which types of verbs can be actor or object focused. So that's a really good episode to watch. Okay, so what does it mean to be an actor or an object focused verb? Well, an actor focused verb means that the subject is doing the action. For example, the boy is playing. Here, the subject is the boy, and he is doing the action. He is playing. So the focus here is on the subject. Whereas for an object-focused verb, the action is being done to the subject. For example, wash the dishes. Here, the subject is the dishes, and something is being done to them. They are going to be washed. So here the focus is more on the object, which is the dishes, versus when the focus is on a subject like a person or the actor. And then let's just review some subject pronouns. Ako is I. Ka is you singular. Siya is he or she. Again, this is gender neutral. You have to listen to the context of the sentence to figure out who someone is talking about. And again, just to point out the pronunciation, it looks like it should be pronounced siya, but it's usually pronounced siya, siya. Sila is they. Tayo is we inclusive. Kami is we exclusive. We'll go back to that. Kayo is you plural. So you all as a class, kayo. So now let's go back to the two different types of we here. So tayo is all of us together. You and me and the whole class, we are all doing the action. So kumakain tayo. We are all eating. Kumakain tayo. So it's inclusive because everyone is doing the action. Versus kami means me and someone else. So me and my husband Chris, we are eating. Kumakain kami. We are eating. You're not doing the action. I'm just telling you about it. So maybe you're calling me and I'm like, oh, kumakain kami. We are eating. So that's exclusive. So the simplest sentence structure in Tagalog is verb plus pronoun. It's the opposite of English where the pronoun goes first. I am running. I am eating. So there the pronoun I goes first. But in Tagalog, it's the opposite. The verb goes first. So for example, let's take a look at the verb to cook, which is magluto. Using the subject pronouns we just learned, here are some simple sentences. Nagluluto ako. I am cooking. Nagluluto ako. Nagluluto ka. You are cooking. Nagluluto siya. He or she is cooking. Nagluluto sila. They are cooking. Nagluluto tayo. We are all cooking together. So remember, that's inclusive. We're all doing it. Nagluluto kami. We are cooking. So me and my husband Chris, nagluluto kami. That's exclusive. And then nagluluto kayo. You all are cooking. Maybe you all as a class, you all are cooking. So this is a good slide to know just because it shows how you can put the verb and the pronoun together, and then it shows how the different subject pronouns are used. Okay, so now just a review that all Tagalog verbs have a root, and then something is added to them, whether it's an affix at the beginning, maybe an infix in the middle, or even a suffix at the end, which we will see today. So something is added to the root to conjugate it to a different tense. So for example, the word magluto, to cook. In the present tense, it's nagluluto ako. I am cooking. Nagluluto ako. In the past tense, nagluto ako. I cooked. Nagluto. In the future tense, magluluto ako. I will cook. Magluluto. And I've underlined and bolded the root here. So luto, that's the root word of to cook. And then an affix is usually added to indicate the different tense. So you can see the different affixes there. And what I want you to get from this slide is that if you can pick out the root word in a conversation, then that's kind of half of the battle, right? Try to pick out root words that you can recognize and then use context clues to determine what is actually being said. So if I heard someone say, oh, nagluluto ako ngayon, then I would say, oh, okay, I know luto means cook. Are they saying that they're cooking right now, or did they cook something yesterday, or will they be cooking tomorrow? So just kind of try to pick out the root words that you know and then kind of go from there for the translation of Tagalog. Okay, so all of that was a review from Lesson 3. Let's jump into the new material now of Lesson 4, the past tense conjugation patterns. So let's start with the mag verbs. These are usually actor-focused and they are the most common type of verb in Tagalog. Some examples are maglakad, to walk, magluto, to cook, magbasa, to read. Now, in the past tense, you have to add the affix nag in the beginning. So now the pattern is nag plus the root. For example, maglakad in the past tense is naglakad. Naglakad ako, I walked. Naglakad siya, she walked. So naglakad is the past tense of to walk in Tagalog. Magluto becomes nagluto. Nagluto ako, I cooked. Nagluto ako ng kanin, I cooked some rice. So nagluto is the past tense of to cook. Magbasa becomes nagbasa. Nagbasa ako, I read. So nagbasa is the past tense of to read. So you can see how the pattern is nag plus the root, right? It's a little different from the present tense. Speaking of, let's go ahead and just compare the present tense to the past tense conjugation of mag verbs. So in the present tense, we learned naglalakad is walking. Naglalakad. If you recall, the present tense conjugation of mag verbs is nag plus the repeated first syllable plus the root. Naglalakad ako, I am walking. Naglalakad. The present tense conjugation of to cook is nagluto. Nagluto ako, I cooked. Then in the present tense, magbasa is nagbabasa. That means reading. Nagbabasa ako, I am reading. Now let's compare these to the past tense conjugation. This is what we learned today. So naglakad is walked. Nagluto is cooked. Nagbasa is read. So there is a slight difference here from the present tense to the past tense. There's no repeated sound, right? So naglalakad ako means I'm walking. Naglakad ako means I walked. So the difference between the tenses can be a little subtle. It's one of those things that you have to train your ear for, right? So for the present tense, you can hopefully recognize that there's a repeated sound. Naglalakad ako. Versus the past tense, naglakad. It's like done. There's no repeated sound. So that's kind of one way to distinguish between the present and the past tense conjugation of mag verbs. All right, now let's take a look at ma verbs. They have a very similar pattern. These are also actor-focused, and some examples are maligo, to shower, matulog, to sleep, manood, to watch. In the past tense, this is the pattern for ma verbs. Now the affix is na, and then it's the root. For example, maligo becomes naligo. Naligo ako, I took a shower. Naligo siya, he took a shower. So it's just naligo. You jot it down. What do you think matulog and manood will be in the past tense? Just use this pattern that we learned, affix na and then the root. What do you think matulog and manood will be in the past tense? Okay, matulog, to sleep, in the past tense is natulog. Natulog ako, I went to sleep. Natulog ako. And then manood will be nanood. So, nanood ako ng sine. I watched a movie. So again, we are just using this pattern, affix na plus the root, and that is how you change ma verbs into the past tense. Let's compare. So in the present tense, I think it'll help if I put them both up together. So in the present tense, shower is naliligo. I am taking a shower. Naliligo ako. Naliligo. In the past tense, it's naligo. Naligo ako. Naligo. That's showered. I took a shower. For the verb matulog, in the present tense, it's natutulog siya. So natutulog is sleeping. In the past tense, it's natulog. That means slept. Then for the verb manood, in the present tense, it's nanonood. Nanonood ako. I am watching something. In the past tense, it's nanood. Nanood ako. I watched something. So it is a very similar pattern to the mag verbs. The only difference is that it doesn't have the G in the affix. But you can see here in the present tense, there is that repeated syllable, whereas in the past tense, there is no repeated syllable. It's just the affix, then the root. All right, so now let's take a look at verbs. These can be actor or object focused depending on the context, and here are some examples. Kain means to eat, takbo means to run, tawa means to laugh. And again, you might be wondering, why are these verbs? There is no in there. Is the infix that is put into the word to conjugate it in the present tense. But in the past tense, this is the pattern. So goes after the first letter when you're using it in the past. For example, kain, to eat, becomes kumain. Kumain ako, I ate. Kumain. Takbo becomes tumakbo. Tumakbo siya. He ran. Tumakbo. So again, the infix just goes after the first letter. Tumakbo. You give it a try. What do you think tawa, to laugh, will be in the past tense? Just use that pattern that we learned. Tawa in the past tense becomes tumawa. Tumawa sila. They laughed. Tumawa. So again, we are just adding the infix after the first letter. So now let's compare. In the present tense, kain is kumakain. Kumakain ako, I am eating. Kumakain ako. In the past tense, it's kumain. Kumain ako, I ate. Kumain. For the word takbo, in the present tense, it's tumatakbo. That means running. Tumatakbo siya. He is running. In the past tense, it's tumakbo. He ran. Tumakbo. Then for the word tawa, which means to laugh, in the present tense, it's tumatawa. Tumatawa sila. They are laughing. Tumatawa. In the past tense, it's tumawa. Tumawa sila. They laughed. Tumawa. Again, if you need to review the present tense conjugation patterns for verbs, be sure to watch lesson 3 because I go over all of that and there are practice questions as well. All right, so let's take a look at verbs. These are usually object focused, and here are some examples. Gamit means to use. Walis means to sweep. In the past tense, the infix goes after the first letter. So gamit, to use, in the past tense is ginamit. Ginamit ko, I used something. Ginamit. So you can see just goes after the first letter. You jot it down. What do you think walis, to sweep, will be in the past tense? Walis in the past tense will be winalis. Winalis ko yung sahig. I swept the floor. Winalis. So let's compare. In the present tense, using is ginagamit. Ginagamit ko. I am using something. Past tense, ginamit. That means I used something. Ginamit ko. In the present tense, to sweep is winawalis. That means sweeping, winawalis. In the past tense, it's winalis. Winalis ko yung sahig. I swept the floor. So it looks like for the most part, when a verb is conjugated in the past tense, the conjugation is usually shorter. There's not a repeated syllable, there's no repeated sound or anything like that. So that's kind of one way to recognize if something is being conjugated in the past. Usually it's a shorter word. All right, so now lastly, let's take a look at verbs. These are usually object focused, and here are some examples. Isara means to close. Ibigay means to give. Itago means to hide. In the past tense, the infix goes after the second letter for verbs. So let's take a look at the word isara, which means to close. In the past tense, it becomes Isinara. Isinara ko yung pinto. The in goes after the second letter. Isinara. Next, the word ibigay, which means to give, becomes ibinigay. Ibinigay ko yung regalo. I gave the gift. Ibinigay. Alrighty, you give it a try. What do you think itago, to hide, will be in the past tense? Remember to just use this pattern that we learned. Itago in the past tense becomes itinago. The in just goes after the second letter. Itinago ko, I hid something. Itinago. Now let's compare. In the present tense, isara is isinasara, closing. Isinasara. In the past tense, it's isinara, closed. Isinara. In the present tense, ibigay becomes ibinibigay. Ibinibigay, that means giving. In the past tense, it's ibinigay, gave. Ibinigay. Lastly, itago, which means to hide, in the present tense is itinatago. That means hiding. Itinatago. In the past tense, it's itinago, hid. Itinago. So those are all of the past tense conjugation patterns for the different types of verbs in Tagalog. I will go ahead and turn off my screen so that we can do some practice questions. All right, so up here in the top left corner are the conjugation patterns that we just learned for all of the different types of verbs. Then here are some subject pronouns that we learned. And then the sentence structure is verb plus pronoun, and then the time goes at the end. And then here are some vocabulary terms to indicate past tense. So kahapon is yesterday, kahapon. Kanina is earlier, kanina. Nung isang araw means the other day. Nung isang araw. Nung isang linggo is the other week or last week. Nung isang buwan means the other month or last month. Nung isang taon means the other year or last year. Okay, now let's take a look at these examples here. So he watched a movie yesterday, and I gave you a hint. To watch is manood. So if we were going to do this together, let's review here that the sentence structure is verb plus pronoun plus time. So the verb here is manood. In the past tense, ma verbs, the pattern is affix na and then the root. So it becomes nanood. Then it's the pronoun siya, he. Nang sine, a movie, kahapon, yesterday. So in our sentence structure, I didn't point out where an object would go. It would go before the time. So nanood siya ng sine kahapon. He watched a movie yesterday. Nanood siya ng sine kahapon. Now you give it a try. You answer 2 through 5. You can pause the video now if you need more time, and then we will go over it. Alrighty, we'll go ahead and go over the answers. So she ran earlier. Remember, the sentence structure is verb plus pronoun plus time. So it would be tumakbo siya kanina. She ran earlier. Tumakbo siya kanina. Number 3, you all cleaned the other day. Maglinis means to clean. Naglinis kayo nung isang araw. Naglinis kayo nung isang araw. You all cleaned the other day. Number 4, we ate some adobo. Kain is to eat. And I wanted you to use the inclusive we, so everyone is eating. Or everyone ate, sorry. Kumain tayo ng adobo. We all ate some adobo. Kumain tayo ng adobo. And then number 5, they walked the other month. Maglakad means to walk. That would be naglakad sila nung isang buwan. They walked the other month. Naglakad sila nung isang buwan. Now, if you noticed, all of these examples are asking about mag, ma, and verbs. Because they are actor-focused, we can use subject pronouns. But if you wanted to use an in or e verb, you actually have to use a possessive pronoun. Remember, for an object-focused verb, the subject here is an object, so we have to use a possessive pronoun because it's almost like the person possesses that object that is in focus. Okay, so that's kind of why we have to use a possessive pronoun. And then the sentence structure now would be verb plus pronoun plus the word yung, which means the. Sometimes it can be ang. They are interchangeable usually. Then it's the noun and then time. And then again, down here in the bottom left corner are the vocab terms to indicate past tense. And let's take a look at some examples. So number 1, I used the car the other week. And I gave you some hints. Gamit means to use. Coche means car. So let's do this one together. So the sentence structure is verb plus pronoun. So it would be ginamit. That is the past tense conjugation of gamit. Remember, for in verbs, the infix in goes after the first letter. So ginamit. Then it's the pronoun ko, which is the possessive pronoun I. Then it's the word yung, which means the. Coche nung isang linggo. So, ginamit ko yung kotse nung isang linggo. I used the car the other week. Go ahead and try 2, 3, and 4. You can pause the video now if you need more time. And remember to just plug in all of the words into this sentence structure. Remember to use the patterns that we learned, and also remember to use possessive pronouns because we are using an object-focused verb now. Okay, go ahead and do these examples and we'll go over it in just a bit. All right, let's go ahead and start with number 2. He closed the door earlier. Isara means to close. Pinto means door. This would be, isinara niya yung pinto kanina. Isinara niya yung pinto kanina. He closed the door earlier. So again, remember for e verbs, the in just goes after the second letter. Then it's the pronoun niya, which is he or she in the possessive pronouns. Then it's the word yung, which means the. Then it's the noun pinto, which means door. Earlier is kanina. So we are just plugging all of the words into the sentence structure and then using the conjugation patterns that we learned. Okay, number 3, you all swept the floor yesterday. Walis means to sweep, sahig means floor. Winalis ninyo yung sahig kahapon. Winalis ninyo yung sahig kahapon. You all swept the floor yesterday. And lastly, they hid the toys the other month. Itago means to hide. Mga laruan means toys. And to make a noun plural, you have to add this word mga. So mga laruan means toys. It's not like in English where we can just add an S. You actually have to add this word mga. In Tagalog, this would be, itinago nila yung mga laruan nung isang buwan. Itinago nila yung mga laruan nung isang buwan. They hid the toys the other month. All right, so these are just some examples of how to use the past tense conjugation patterns that we learned and how you can plug in all the vocabulary that you learned into this simple sentence structure. Alrighty, now let's go ahead and jump right into the future tense conjugation patterns of these verbs. Let's start with mag verbs. Again, our mag verbs are maglakad to walk, magluto to cook, magbasa to read. Now in the future tense, this is the pattern. Now it's the affix mag, then there's a repeated first syllable, and then the root. So in the future tense, if you wanted to say will walk, maglakad becomes maglalakad. So it's the affix mag, then there's a repeated first syllable, and then it's the root, lakad. So maglalakad ako, I will walk. Maglalakad. Magluto, to cook, in the future tense will be magluluto. Again, the affix is mag, then there's the repeated first syllable, and then the root. Magluluto sila, they will cook. Lastly, magbasa, to read, becomes magbabasa. Magbabasa ako, I will read. So let's compare all of these tenses together. And let's just take a look at the highlighted ones. So in the present tense, to walk, it is naglalakad. That means walking, naglalakad. In the past tense, to walk is naglakad, walked, naglakad. In the future tense, it's maglalakad, maglalakad. That is will walk. So future tense and present tense are very similar for mag verbs. The only difference is the first letter. So it's one of those things where you have to listen very carefully, but also rely on the context clues in case you miss what that first letter was. Okay, so it is a very similar pattern for present and future tense conjugation of mag verbs. Next, let's take a look at ma verbs. It's a very similar pattern to the mag verbs. Again, here are some ma verbs. Maligo, to shower. Matulog, to sleep. Manood, to watch. In the future tense, here is the pattern for ma verbs. Now the affix is ma, then there's a repeated first syllable, and then it's the root. So maligo, to shower, in the future tense will be maliligo. The affix is ma, then there's a repeated first syllable, and then it's the root. Maliligo ako, I will take a shower. You jot it down. What do you think matulog, to sleep, and manood, to watch, will be in the future tense? And remember to just use this new pattern. Okay, in the future tense, matulog, to sleep, will be matutulog. Matutulog ako, I will go to sleep. Matutulog. So the affix is ma, then there's a repeated first syllable, and then the root. Matutulog. And then manood, to watch, will be manunood. Affix is ma, then there's a repeated first syllable, and then the root. Manunood ako, I will watch. Now let's compare all of the tenses together for ma verbs. Let's just take a look at the highlighted ones. Maligo means to shower. In the present tense, it's naliligo ako. Showering, taking a shower. Naliligo ako. In the past tense, it's naligo, showered. Naligo. In the future tense, it's maliligo. Maliligo ako. I will take a shower. Again, for ma verbs, it's a very similar pattern for present and future tense conjugation. The only difference is that first letter. But they both have that repeated first syllable. So again, try to listen carefully or try to rely on the context clues so that you can figure out what they're talking about. Okay, next, verbs. Our verbs are kain, to eat, takbo, to run, tawa, to laugh. Now the pattern for verbs is you repeat the first syllable. So take a look at this. Kain, to eat, becomes kakain. Kakain ako, I will eat. Kakain ako ng pansit. I will eat some pansit. So it's very interesting because now there's no infix at all for future tense conjugation of verbs. You just simply repeat the first syllable. So let's take a look at takbo, which means to run. Takbo in the future tense becomes tatakbo. Tatakbo sila, they will run. Tatakbo. Again, you're just repeating the first syllable. You give it a try. What do you think? Tawa, to laugh, will be in the future tense. All right, tawa will be tatawa. Tatawa sila, they will laugh. So you're just repeating the first syllable for the future tense conjugation of verbs. Very interesting. They just dropped the altogether. So let's go ahead and compare all of the conjugation patterns for verbs. We'll just take a look at the verb kain here, highlighted in yellow. In the present tense, to eat, it's kumakain. Kumakain ako. I am eating. Kumakain. In the past tense, it's kumain. Kumain ako. I ate. And then in the future tense, it's kakain. Kakain ako. I will eat. So very interesting. All of the conjugation patterns are different for verbs here. Then in verbs, some examples are gamit, to use, walis, to sweep. Now the pattern for future tense conjugation of in verbs is that you have to repeat the first syllable, then it's the root, then in goes at the end. So take a look at the word gamit, which means to use. In the future tense, it would be gagamitin. Gagamitin ko yung kotse. I will use the car. Gagamitin. So you repeat the first syllable, then it's the root, then it's in at the end. So this is very interesting. We haven't seen a suffix yet, so the in goes at the end of the word. This is the first time we've seen this. You jot it down. What do you think walis, to sweep, will be in the future tense? And just use this pattern. All right, walis in the future tense will be wawalisin. Wawalisin ko yung sahig. I will sweep the floor. Wawalisin. So again, you just repeat the first syllable, then it's the root, and then in goes at the end. Let's compare all of the conjugation patterns for in verbs. We'll just take a look at the ones highlighted in yellow. So gamit means to use. In the present tense, it's ginagamit, using, ginagamit. In the past tense, it's ginamit, used, ginamit. And in the future tense, gagamitin, will use, gagamitin. So very interesting there. Lastly, e-verbs. Some examples are isara, to close, ibigay, to give, itago, to hide. Now, for the future tense conjugation of e-verbs, you would just repeat the second syllable. Isara, to close, becomes isasara. Isasara ko yung pinto. I will close the door. Isasara. You just repeat the second syllable. You give it a try. What do you think ibigay, to give, and itago, to hide, will be in the future tense? And just follow this pattern. Okay? Ibigay will be ibibigay. Ibibigay ko yung regalo. I will give the gift. Ibibigay. And then itago, to hide, will be itatago. Itatago ko yung pera. I will hide the money. Itatago. So again, you are just repeating the second syllable. Let's go ahead and compare all of these conjugation patterns for e-verbs. In the present tense, isara, to close, is isinasara. Isinasara. That means closing. Isinasara. Past tense, it's isinara, closed. Isinara. And then in the future tense, it's isasara, will close. Isasara. All right, so those are all of the future tense conjugation patterns for the verb types in Tagalog. Now let's do some practice questions. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my screen again. Now in the top left corner are the future tense conjugation patterns that we learned for all of the verbs. Then are the subject pronouns. And then it's the sentence structure down in the bottom left corner. And now in the green are some vocabulary terms to indicate future tense. So bukas is tomorrow, bukas. Mamaya means later, mamaya. Sa susunod na linggo, next week. Sa susunod na buwan, next month. And sa susunod na taon, next year. Now here are some examples. Let's do the first one together. I will watch a movie tomorrow. Manood means to watch. So again, let's take a look at our sentence structure. It should be verb plus pronoun plus time. Manonood is the future tense conjugation of manood. Manonood ako means I. Ng sine bukas means tomorrow. Manunood ako ng sine bukas. I will watch a movie tomorrow. Again, if you're going to add an object, it would just go right before time. So you give it a try. You can pause the video now if you need. You do numbers 2 through 5 and we'll go over them in just a bit. All right, let's start with number 2. They will run later. Takbo means to run. Tatakbo sila mamaya. Tatakbo sila mamaya. Number 3, we exclusive will clean next week. Maglinis means to clean. Maglilinis kami sa susunod na linggo. Maglilinis kami sa susunod na linggo. We will clean next week. Number 4, you singular will eat pansit later. Kain means to eat. Kakain ka ng pansit mamaya. Kakain ka ng pansit mamaya. And then lastly, she will walk next month. Maglakad. Maglalakad siya sa susunod na buwan. Maglalakad siya sa susunod na buwan. All right. Again, these examples focus on the mag, ma, and verbs. Since they are actor-focused, we can use subject pronouns. But if we want to use in or e verbs, we actually have to use possessive pronouns. Remember, when we are using object-focused verbs, we have to use a possessive pronoun because it's almost like the subject or the person is in possession of that object. And the sentence structure is verb plus pronoun plus the word yung, which means the. Then it's the noun, then it's time. And again, the box in green has the vocabulary terms to indicate future tense. And now let's do these examples. Let's start with number 1. We, exclusive, will use the car later. Gamit means to use. Coche means car. So let's take a look at the sentence structure. The verb should come first. So the future tense conjugation of gamit, let's take a look at in verbs. Repeat the first syllable, then it's the root, then you add in at the end. So it would be gagamitin. Gagamitin, then it's we exclusive, namin, yung kotse mamaya. Gagamitin namin yung kotse mamaya. You give it a try. You can pause the video now. You try 2, 3, and 4. Just plug in the vocabulary into the sentence structure and then use the conjugation patterns for in and e verbs. Go ahead and do that and we'll check it in just a bit. Alrighty, let's go ahead and do number 2. He will close the store next week. Isara means to close. Tindahan means store. Isasara niya yung tindahan sa susunod na taon. Isasara niya yung tindahan sa susunod na taon. He will close the store next week. Number 3, you all will sweep the floor tomorrow. Walis means to sweep. Sahig means floor. Wawalisin ninyo yung sahig bukas. Wawalisin ninyo yung sahig bukas. You all will sweep the floor tomorrow. And lastly, number 4, they will hide the toys next month. Itago means to hide. Mga laruan means toys. Itatago nila yung mga laruan sa susunod na buwan. Itatago nila yung mga laruan sa susunod na buwan. So these are just some examples on how to use the future tense conjugation of these verbs. And it gives a good practice on how to use this sentence structure where the verb comes first, then it's the pronoun, and then sometimes an object, and then the time goes at the end. So hopefully you can recognize this pattern when you hear native Tagalog speakers speaking Tagalog. Now I want to finish off our lesson with a quick Taglish tip. And Taglish is Tagalog and English put together. I am a big supporter of using Taglish. I think it's a great stepping stone for learning new vocabulary, especially while you are learning a new language. It's not very attainable to try and speak a language fluently right away, and no one is making you do that, okay? So take your time, try to use as much Tagalog as you can, even if that means having to use Taglish or Tagalog and English put together in a sentence. So let's take a look at these examples. I drove yesterday. She will swim later. They jumped earlier. We didn't learn these verbs. We didn't learn to drive. We also didn't learn to swim or to jump. But you can always turn them into a mug verb. So that means mug plus the English verb. Then conjugate it like you would in the past or the future as a mug verb. And then you can use subject pronouns in your sentence. So let's take a look at number 1, I drove yesterday. What if I told you to use mug drive? Now conjugate it in the past tense because it's drove. I drove yesterday. It would be nag-drive. Nag-drive ako kahapon. I drove yesterday. Nag-drive ako kahapon. So see, we are just using the pattern that we've already learned and using this mug plus an English verb. So go ahead and try number 2 and 3. You can use mug swim and mug jump. And then we'll go over it in just a second. Alrighty, for number 2, she will swim later. If I told you to use mug swim, it would be magsiswim siya mamaya. Magsiswim siya mamaya. So again, for the future tense conjugation of a mug verb, it's mug plus the repeated first syllable plus the root. Magsiswim siya mamaya. She will swim later. Lastly, they jumped earlier. If I told you to use mug jump, it would be nagjump sila kanina. The affix is nag, then it's the root for a past tense conjugation of mug verbs. So nagjump sila kanina. So that is just a quick way to use Taglish, but I do encourage you to go back and look up these words in Tagalog so that you can say the whole phrase in Tagalog eventually. For example, to drive in Tagalog is magmaneho. So this would actually be nagmaneho ako kahapon. I drove yesterday. Nagmaneho ako kahapon. To swim is langoy. So this would be lalangoy siya mamaya. Langoy is an verb. So lalangoy siya mamaya. And then lastly, talon. Talon means to jump. So tumalon sila kanina. It's also an verb. So those are just some ways to use Taglish in a conversation. Now, you don't want to rely on Taglish forever. The goal is to hopefully get fluent in Tagalog. So look up words that you don't know so that you can say the whole phrase in Tagalog eventually. Alrighty, well, we learned so much in today's lesson. Here's just a quick recap. We reviewed the different types of Tagalog verbs and the pronouns that we can use in a simple sentence. Then we reviewed the present tense conjugation of these verbs and then jumped right into the past and future tense patterns. Then we did some practice questions and then finished off with a Taglish tip, which I hope you can start using in your everyday conversations. Again, I strongly encourage you to watch lessons 3 and 4 together because they build on each other. Be sure to take detailed notes so that you can keep all of these conjugation patterns straight. Hopefully this will help you recognize some of these patterns and recognize the tenses and definitely root words now that you know some vocabulary when you're listening to Tagalog speakers. If you would like some more Tagalog resources, please follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, where I post shorter videos throughout the week that will help you learn Tagalog on the go. I also have an Instagram subscription if you would like extended videos and also a monthly newsletter where I recap all of my Tagalog lessons that I post on Instagram. I also have a Stan store where I have some products and then sometimes some group classes if they are available. You might want to check that out. And lastly, feel free to check out my Amazon storefront where I have links to some fun products about the Filipino culture, which I think you might enjoy. Well, thank you again for spending some time with me. I hope to see you in the next Tagalog Time episode. Paalam! Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Tagalog Time with Pat. This is episode 5, and we will be learning how to use possessive pronouns with nouns. In Tagalog, have you ever wanted to say something like, my friend is funny, her dog is brown, or that's Sam and Mary's house, or that's mine? Basically, anything that shows possession or a way to express ownership, that is what we are going to be learning today. So here's today's lesson agenda. We will be learning the different types of possessive pronouns. Then we will learn the various sentence structures for how to use them. And then we will learn possessive sentence markers and demonstrative pronouns so that we can make a variation of sentences. And then we will learn a Taglish tip, and then we will be doing practice questions all throughout the lesson. So go ahead and grab your piece of paper and something to write with so that we can practice. All right, so what is a possessive pronoun? Well, it's a part of speech that is used to describe ownership or possession of a noun. If you recall, if you've been following these series in a chronological order, we have already been learning possessive pronouns, but we've been using them with a verb. So specifically with an object-focused verb, we've been using a possessive pronoun because the idea is that the person in that sentence is in possession of the object that is in focus. So these 3 examples are a review of the past couple lessons, lessons 3 and 4. They are straight from those slides. So I am going to use the car tomorrow. Gamit means to use. Kotse means car. In Tagalog, it would be gagamitin ko yung kotse bukas. It's a future tense sentence, so it's gagamitin. And then ko is the possessive pronoun here, meaning I. So gagamitin ko yung kotse bukas. Number 2, she swept the floor earlier. Walis means to sweep. Sahig means floor. In Tagalog, this would be winalis niya yung sahig kanina. Winalis is the past tense form of to sweep. Niya is the possessive pronoun here, meaning she. And then number 3, they are closing the door. Isinasara nila yung pinto. Isinasara is the present tense conjugation of isara, which means to close. Nila means they. So here are the possessive pronouns we already know. We've been using them with a verb, but today we will learn how to use them with a noun. All right, so a possessive pronoun sometimes can be called a possessive adjective or a personal pronoun. And an adjective is something that describes a noun. So if you were to say my house, you are kind of describing it. You're describing whose it is. It's mine, right? It's my house. So it kind of makes sense that sometimes it's called a possessive adjective. And then same with personal pronoun. A pronoun means it's something that is replacing the noun. So if I were to say, I am sweeping, ko is that pronoun since it's meaning I. Okay, so these are the different names for possessive pronoun depending on what type of resource you're using. Now let's review the possessive pronouns that we've already learned. Ko means I or my. Mo is you or your singular. Niya, he or she, his or her. Again, this is gender neutral. Nila, they or their. Natin, we or our inclusive. Namin, we or our exclusive. Ninyo is you or your plural. So that's you all as a class. And we will take a look at the difference between this inclusive and exclusive meaning here. So let's take a look at the noun house. In Tagalog, house is bahay. Bahay ko is my house. Bahay ko. Bahay mo is your house. Singular. So that's just you, one person, your house. Bahay mo. Bahay niya, his or her house. So niya is gender neutral. You really have to focus on the context of the sentence to determine who someone is talking about. Bahay niya. Bahay nila, their house. Bahay natin, our house inclusive. So if you and me and the whole class, we all lived in the same house, we could say bahay natin. Everyone is included there. Versus bahay namin means our house exclusive. So me and my husband Chris, we have our own house. That's bahay namin. You're not included. I'm just telling you about it. So bahay namin. And then bahay ninyo, your house, plural. So you all as a class, you all have a house. That's bahay ninyo, your house. So I want to point out the word order here is object plus the pronoun. Bahay ko. This is different from English because we would say my house. The pronoun goes first, my house, and then it's the object. So in Tagalog, it's the opposite. The object goes first, and then it's the pronoun. And this is an important note. These types of possessive pronouns never go at the beginning of the sentence in Tagalog. They go after the object. So you would never start your sentence with ko or mo or niya. It just doesn't work like that. All right, so let's do some examples. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my screen here. Now, in order to use these possessive pronouns in a sentence, we have to have a noun and an adjective. So we will learn some of these nouns and adjectives here. In this top left corner are the possessive pronouns we just learned. Now here are some nouns. So aso is dog, pusa is cat, coche is car, bahay is house, pagkain, food, mga damit, clothes, buhok, hair, ulo, head, mga kamay, hands. So again, that's how you make something plural. You have to add the word mga before it. Mga kamay means hands. Now here are some words for people that you might know. Tatay, father, nanay, mother, kapatid, brother or sister. So that's gender neutral. Kapatid is a brother or a sister. Mga anak, children, kaibigan, friend. And now here are some adjectives. So here are different colors, mga kulay. Pula is red, kahel, orange, dilaw, yellow, verde, green, azul, blue, lila, purple, puti, white, itim, black, abo, gray, rosas, pink, ginto, gold, kayumanggi, brown. And some more adjectives, masakit, hurts, sira, broken, nawawala, missing, masaya, happy, bago, new, malayo, far away, masarap, delicious, malamig, cold. And lastly, let's finish off with some more adjectives, matangkad, tall, maliit, little, malaki, big, mahaba, long, maikli, short, thing, nakakatawa, funny, maganda, beautiful, guapo, handsome. All right, so that's a lot of vocabulary right there, which is great because then we can make a variety of sentences. Now here is the sentence structure for using these possessive pronouns. So first comes the adjective, then it's the word ang, which means is or are, then it's the object, and then it's the pronoun. So let's take a look at some examples. Number 1, your, plural, food is delicious. Let's do this one together. So the adjective comes first. Take a look at the sentence structure. Adjective comes first, so it would be masarap. It's right over here in this pink box. Masarap means delicious. Then it's the word ang. Then it's the object, food, which is here in the noun section, food, pagkain. And then it's the pronoun, ninyo, plural. Your food is delicious. Masarap ang pagkain ninyo. So do you see how we just plugged everything into the sentence structure here? It's a matter of knowing these vocabulary terms and then just putting it into the sentence structure. This is a good phrase to know if you're visiting like a Filipino restaurant, or if you are visiting a family member, like someone who's older than you, and you want to be respectful after they fed you. You could say, "Masarap ang pagkain ninyo." Your food is delicious. All right, so go ahead and take a minute and do the rest of these examples, and then we will go over it in just a bit. All right, so let's start with number 2. My head hurts. It would be, masakit ang ulo ko. Masakit ang ulo ko. My head hurts. Number 3, his brother is funny. Nakakatawa ang kapatid niya. Nakakatawa ang kapatid niya. So kapatid is one of those words that's gender neutral. If you wanted to be specific and say brother, like this sentence is perfectly fine, but you could go further and say, nakakatawa ang kapatid na lalaki niya. Or nakakatawa ang kapatid niya na lalaki. So, but usually you can just say, nakakatawa ang kapatid niya. Number 4, their car is broken. Sira ang kotse nila. Sira ang kotse nila. Number 5, our exclusive house is far away. Malayo ang bahay namin. Malayo ang bahay namin. Number 6, your singular hands are cold. Malamig ang mga kamay mo. Malamig ang mga kamay mo. And lastly, number 7, our inclusive cat is black and white. Itim at puti ang pusa natin. And that is how you say and. It's just the word at, A-T. Itim at puti ang pusa natin. All right, so here is a quick Taglish tip. Taglish is Tagalog and English put together. I am a big supporter of using English in Tagalog if you are still learning new vocabulary. So here is one way you can use it. So here is the sentence structure we just learned. If you don't know an adjective or an object in Tagalog, just say that word in English. For example, his cousin is beautiful, or my child is heavy. We didn't learn the word for cousin, we didn't learn the word for heavy. So you can just say them in English. Maganda ang cousin niya. His cousin is beautiful. Maganda ang cousin niya. Or heavy ang anak ko. My child is heavy. Heavy ang anak ko. So that works. That's perfectly fine. But the idea is to go back and look up what those words are later so that eventually you can say the whole thing in Tagalog. Maganda ang pinsan niya. So pinsan is cousin. And this is gender neutral as well. Maganda ang pinsan niya. Or mabigat ang anak ko. Mabigat means heavy. So if you don't know a word in Tagalog, don't be discouraged. I do want you to try and use Tagalog as much as you can, even if that means having to sneak in some English here and there. And then hopefully someone will just correct you and say, oh, cousin in Tagalog is pinsan. So then you can just start saying pinsan in your sentences. All right, so here are the examples we just did, and I want to take a closer look at number 1. Your food is delicious. And you can say it in an alternative way. So your food is delicious. We just learned, masarap ang pagkain ninyo. Adjective comes first, then it's the object, then it's the possessive pronoun. That's the sentence structure we just learned. However, you could switch it up and say, ang pagkain ninyo ay masarap. That also means your food is delicious. Ang pagkain ninyo ay masarap. Now the object is at the beginning. Then it's the possessive pronoun, then it's the adjective. So there is kind of a change in the grammar structure here. And now you are using this word ay, which is a sentence connector, which means is. So ang in this phrase means is, but then when you're switching it up, I is the connector here. Not a lot of people use this second form. It's more formal. It's more casual to just say, masarap ang pagkain ninyo. But this is not wrong. Ang pagkain ninyo ay masarap. That is perfectly correct. It's grammatically correct. It's just not very colloquial. It's not what's used in common conversation every day. Okay, so that's just a note on how you can say or hear things if you happen to hear it this way. All right, and then I just want to point out that all of these phrases could be turned into that alternative phrase. So, masakit ang ulo ko could turn into ang ulo ko ay masakit. That also means my head hurts. It's kind of more poetic. It's like not a lot of people say it that way. Ang ulo ko ay masakit. It's just very literal. So it's more common for someone to say masakit ang ulo ko. But you could hear it as ang ulo ko ay masakit. That's right. It's correct. And then nakakatawa ang kapatid niya. That could be said as ang kapatid niya ay nakakatawa. So again, you're just switching up the word order here, but it means the same thing. All right, so now let's learn some demonstrative pronouns. It started to rain over here. I wonder if you can hear it. So what is a demonstrative pronoun? Sometimes they're called demonstrative adjectives, again, because it's describing a noun. Well, it's a part of speech that helps identify someone or something. So here are some examples. Ito means this or these. Yan means that or those. So I'm saying yan, but it's technically iyan, iyan. But it's more common to just hear someone say yan. So here's the sentence structure for how demonstrative pronouns can be used. Ito or iyan goes first. It's taking the place of the adjective. Then it's the word ang, then it's the object, then it's the pronoun. So the last part of this sentence structure is the same as what we've just learned. So here's how it's used. This is my house would be ito ang bahay ko. Ito ang bahay ko. This is my house. So ito goes first, then it's the word ang, then it's bahay, and then it's the pronoun. Ito ang bahay ko. That is my house would be iyan ang bahay ko. That is my house. Iyan ang bahay ko. So ito means this, iyan means that. And it can be used in a plural way as well. They can mean singular or plural things. So these are my kids is still ito ang mga anak ko. Ito ang mga anak ko. These are my kids. Those are my kids. Iyan ang mga anak ko. So ito means these. Iyan means those. Now there is an alternative way to say these phrases, which is still correct. So this is my house, we just learned. Ito ang bahay ko. You might also hear it as bahay ko ito. Bahay ko ito. So it's using that demonstrative pronoun ito, and then there's the object and there's the pronoun. So the word order is switched up and we took out the word ang. It's just kind of included in that phrase already. Bahay ko ito, this is my house. Same with that is my house. We learned iyan ang bahay ko. But you could also hear bahay ko yan. Bahay ko iyan. Both forms of these phrases are correct. There's not one wrong way to say it. Ito ang bahay ko might be a little bit formal, but it's said just as much as bahay ko ito. Okay, so these are the two ways you might hear the demonstrative pronoun being used with a noun. So let's do some examples. These are my kids is ito ang mga anak ko. We learned that. And then those are my kids. Yan ang mga anak ko. I want you to think of the alternative. Remember, we took out the word ang, and then we had to switch up the order. So if you need to take a look at the last slide, you can flip back. But go ahead and pause the video now if you'd like, and then we'll go over it. Okay, so the alternative for ito ang mga anak ko would be mga anak ko ito. So the object goes first, then it's the pronoun, then it's the demonstrative pronoun. Mga anak ko ito. Yan ang mga anak ko can also be said, mga anak ko yan. Mga anak ko iyan. Okay, so those are the different ways you could say these phrases. They are both used equally as much. Okay? So this is just a review of the sentence structure for using these pronouns. Usually it's the adjective first, or it could be the demonstrative pronoun ito, iyan. then it's the word ang, and then it's the object, and then it's the pronoun. So that's the sentence structure. And then remember that these possessive pronouns never go at the beginning of the sentence. They always go after the object. Okay? Now I want to take a look at some possessive sentence markers. What is a possessive sentence marker? Well, it's a part of speech that indicates ownership specific to a person or multiple people. So now if we want to say someone's name, like we're saying it belongs to someone specific, this is how we're going to do it. So we would use the word ni for one person. We would use the word nina for multiple people. So take a look at this. Mary's children are smart. So it's just one person. It's Mary. It would be, matalino ang mga anak ni Mary. So this is the same sentence structure. It's the adjective, then it's the word ang, then it's the object. And instead of a pronoun, now we're adding someone's name. And in order to do that, we have to use this possessive sentence marker, ni, because it's just one person. Matalino ang mga anak ni Mary. Mary's children are smart. Now, if we're talking about multiple people, like this is Sam and Jane's car, then you would have to use the word nina. Ito ang kotse nina Sam and Jane. So it's still that same sentence structure. Ito is the demonstrative pronoun, then it's the word ang, then it's the object kotse, and now instead of a pronoun, we're using someone's name, but then we have to use this possessive sentence marker, nina, because it's multiple people. So ito ang kotse nina Sam at Jane. This is Sam and Jane's car. All right, so this is that sentence structure I was just talking about. It's the adjective, plus it's the word ang, then it's the object, then it's ni or nina, and then the names go at the end. So here are some examples. Let's do number one together. Sarah's head hurts. Head is ulo, hurts is masakit. So let's just follow this sentence structure. So adjective comes first, masakit, ang, ulo, which is the object, ni, Sarah. So it's just one person, so we would choose ni. Masakit ang ulo ni Sarah. Sarah's head hurts. You take a minute, you do number 2 and 3, and then we will go over it. Okay, number 2, John and Amy's house is far. House is bahay, far is malayo. Malayo ang bahay nina John at Amy. Malayo ang bahay nina John at Amy. So we use nina because it's multiple people. And number 3, that is Mario's cat. Cat is pusa. Yan ang pusa ni Mario. Iyan ang pusa ni Mario. So it's just one person, so we would use the possessive sentence marker, ni. Now, there are some different ways to say these phrases. Let's take a look at the example. This is Sarah's house. We learned, ito ang bahay ni Sarah. But you could also hear, bahay ito ni Sarah. So in this case, the object goes first, then it's the demonstrative pronoun, then it's the possessive sentence marker, ni, and then it's the name. Bahay ito ni Sarah. Another example, that is Mark and Molly's house. It would be, iyan ang bahay ni Mark at Molly. So we've learned these sentence structures already. It's the demonstrative pronoun, then it's the word ang, then it's the object, and then it's usually the pronoun, or in this case, it's the people with the possessive sentence marker. Now, the alternative way to say this is, bahay iyan ni Mark at Molly. So the object goes first, then it's the demonstrative pronoun, then it's the sentence marker, and then it's the people's name. Bahay iyan ni Mark at Molly. So these two ways to say these phrases are both correct. They are used equally as much. So you might hear them in those ways, or you could practice saying them either way. I would say it's more casual to say, bahay ito ni Sarah. But if I'm walking around and we happen to be walking by Sarah's house, I could say, oh, ito ang bahay ni Sarah. This is Sarah's house. So it kind of just depends on the context of what you're trying to say. Okay, but they are both used equally as much. Okay, now let's take a look at this last set of possessive pronouns. They are different from the first set that we learned. These are also known as sa personal pronouns, and you'll see why. So these pronouns can replace the noun in the sentence. Not always, but they can, and you'll see what I mean. So akin means mine, akin. Iyo means yours, singular. That's just you, it's yours. Kanya means his or her. Kanila is theirs. Atin is ours, inclusive. Amin is ours, exclusive. Inyo is yours, plural. So these are all pronouns that still show possession or ownership, but they are different from the ones we just learned. So it's not ko or mo or nya, but now it's akin, iyo, kanya, and it means mine, yours, his or hers. Okay, so we'll take a look at how they are used. Let's take a look at car. Car in Tagalog is coche. And remember how I said that these possessive pronouns are usually considered sa pronouns? And this is why. Usually you would use them with the word sa. Sa akin ang coche. The car is mine. Sa akin ang coche. Sa by itself is a preposition which means to, but it can be used in a number of different ways in Tagalog. And with these possessive pronouns, it's usually said before the possessive pronoun when you're using it in a sentence. So, sa akin ang coche, the car is mine, sa akin. Sa iyo ang coche, the car is yours, singular. Sa kanya ang coche, the car is his or hers. And that's gender neutral, kanya. Sa kanila ang coche, the car is theirs. Sa atin ang coche, the car is ours, inclusive. Maybe we are all sharing a car. Sa atin ang coche, the car is ours. Sa amin ang coche, the car is ours, exclusive. So me and my husband Chris, the car is ours. Mine and his. It's ours. Sa inyo ang coche, the car is yours. So maybe you all as a class, you are sharing a car. The car is yours, you plural. So this is the word order now. So it's the pronoun first, then it's ang, then it's the object. Sa akin ang coche, the car is mine. And these pronouns go before the object. Remember I had been saying that the pronouns ko, mo, nya never go at the start of the sentence? Well, for these pronouns, akin, iyo, kanya, they actually do go at the beginning and they go before the object. So that's kind of a difference there. Okay, let's take a look at some examples. I think I have to turn off my screen, so let me go ahead and do that. Now here is the word order that we just talked about. Pronoun first, then it's ang, then it's the object. And here are some examples. And here are the pronouns that we just learned. So go ahead and take a minute to do these 3 examples and then we'll go over them together. All right, so let's start with number 1. The dogs are yours, plural. Sa inyo ang mga aso. So the pronoun is sa inyo, which is yours, plural. Ang, and then it's the object, mga aso. Mga makes it plural. So sa inyo ang mga aso, the dogs are yours. Number 2, the food is ours, inclusive. So yours and mine together, we are sharing it. The food is ours. Food is pagkain. It would be sa atin ang pagkain. Sa atin ang pagkain. Lastly, number 3, the clothes are hers. Clothes is mga damit. It would be sa kanya ang mga damit. Sa kanya ang mga damit. Now I want to take a look at the difference between ang and yung. Both of these words mean the, so it's an article leading up to a noun. So far, we've been practicing with the word ang, and that just means the in a general sense. But in common conversation, and oftentimes I say yung, which is specific to a thing, like that one thing over there or that specific one. So for example, The dogs are yours, plural. Sa inyo ang mga aso. That just means, oh, the dogs are yours. The dogs, any dogs, the dogs are yours. Whereas if I were to say, sa inyo yung mga aso, maybe we had already been talking about specific dogs, like, oh, the two right there. Sa inyo yung mga aso. The dogs are yours. So it's a very subtle difference there, ang and yung. And oftentimes people are just using them interchangeably. But when I use yung, it's like I'm already talking about something specific. We had already been talking about some specific dogs, and I'm like, oh yeah, the dogs are yours. Now the next example, the clothes are hers, we learned, sa kanya ang mga damit. The clothes are hers. We're just talking about it in a general sense. We don't know what clothes specifically. We're just saying, oh, the clothes are hers. But if we had already been talking about maybe a box of clothes that's on the floor and someone was like, whose clothes are these? We could say, sa kanya yung mga damit. Oh, the clothes are hers. These specific ones, the clothes are hers. So that is the slight difference there between ang and yung. You will certainly hear them interchangeably in common conversation. Just for our practice, I indicate which one I want you guys to use. So sometimes it's ang, sometimes it's yung, but just know that there is a slight difference, but they are mostly the same. All right, now let's switch gears a little bit. Na is a sentence marker that is used to connect an adjective. So for example, the house is theirs. We learned, sa kanila yung bahay. The house is theirs. Sa kanila yung bahay. It's a very simple sentence. If you want to add an adjective, the big house is theirs. This is how you would do it. Sa kanila yung bahay na malaki. So see, we added an adjective now. And you would do it by adding this sentence marker na, and then it's the adjective malaki. Sa kanila yung bahay na malaki. But you could also hear it this way. Sa kanila yung malaking bahay. So this is an alternative phrase, but it still means the big house is theirs. Sa kanila yung malaking bahay. Technically, this is malaki na bahay. The na is in there, but it's being incorporated into the adjective malaki. And you only make this contraction if the adjective ends with a vowel. So see, malaki ends with an I, and when you are putting the adjective first, instead of saying malaki na bahay, you could just say malaking bahay. So it's a contraction. Now let's take a look at another example. The little house is theirs. Sa kanila yung bahay na maliit. So there's that sentence marker na, and then the adjective maliit means little. You could also hear sa kanila yung maliit na bahay. So we just switched it. We put the adjective first. And now we don't make the contraction. We don't put it together because it doesn't end with a vowel. You would still use this sentence marker na. So that's just one important thing. If the adjective does end with a vowel, you can make a contraction. And just know that the sentence marker na is there. Malaking bahay technically is malaki na bahay. But we just made the contraction just to make it easier to pronounce and make the sentence flow a little bit better. But if the adjective ends with a consonant, you don't make the contraction because it doesn't really work like that. And these two ways to say these phrases are used equally as much. There isn't a formal way, there isn't a casual way. It's just kind of personal preference or depending on what someone wants to say. Now let's do some examples. It is the sentence structure pronoun first, then the word yung. Now I want you guys to just practice yung, but again, remember it means the, and it's interchangeable with the word ang usually. Then it's the object, then it's the word na, and then it's the adjective at the end. And then here are the possessive pronouns that we learned. And here are some examples. Let's do the first one together. The white car is mine. White is puti, car is coche. So let's just follow this sentence structure. Pronoun first, sa akin, yung, then it's the object coche, then it's the sentence marker na, and then it's puti, the adjective. Sa akin yung kotse na puti. The white car is mine. Sa akin yung kotse na puti. What do you think the alternative way to say this would be? So remember, you can put the adjective before the object, and depending on whether or not there's a vowel at the end, you can make the contraction. What do you think the alternative phrase would be for sa akin yung kotse na puti? The alternative phrase you could say is sa akin yung puting kotse. So remember, the adjective can go first, and technically the sentence marker na is here, but we just made a connection. So puting kotse. Sa akin yung puting kotse. So for these next examples, I want you to make the sentence using the sentence structure, but also write it in the alternative way. Remember, these two ways to say it are equally used as much. So there is the vowel again, just pointing it out. You can make the contraction because puti is the adjective and it ends with a vowel. Go ahead and take a minute, do these examples, and then we'll go over it. All right, number 2, the black and orange cat is ours, inclusive. Black is itim, orange is kahel, cat is pusa. It would be, sa atin yung pusa na itim at kahel. Sa atin yung pusa na itim at kahel. Remember to say and if you have more than one adjective. It's just the word at. That means and. Now, the alternative way to say this would be, sa atin yung itim at kahel na pusa. So na is still there because itim and kahel end with a consonant. There's nothing to make a contraction for. So sa atin yung itim at kahel na pusa. All right, number 3, the new clothes are not yours. Singular. New means bago. Clothes is mga damit. So this is a way to kind of negate a thought. So it's not something we've seen so far, so this is how you do it. Hindi sa iyo yung mga damit na bago. So everything here is the same. We've already learned it. Pronoun, then it's yung, then it's object, then it's na, and then bago, the adjective. The only difference is that we've added the word hindi, which means no, but in this sentence, it can mean not. So the new clothes are not yours. Hindi sa iyo yung mga damit na bago. So that's how you would say not. And the alternative way to say it is, hindi sa iyo yung mga bagong damit. Hindi sa iyo yung mga bagong damit. Here you can make the contraction, bago na damit. Could just be bagong damit. All right, now let's practice with some demonstrative pronouns. Ito means this or these. Yan means that or those. If you wanted to say this is mine, it would be sa akin ito. Sa akin ito. Or you might hear sakin to. Sakin to. So a lot of people just put all the words together or shorten it. Sakin to, this is mine. That is yours is sa iyo yan. Sa iyo yan. So the pronoun goes first, and then it's the demonstrative pronoun. You might hear sa'yo yan. Sa'yo yan. And then lastly, that's not mine. Again, negating the thought. It would be hindi sa akin yan. Hindi sa akin yan. Or hindi sa akin yan. Hindi sa akin yan. All right. Now let's do some examples. First, it's the pronoun, and then it's the demonstrative pronoun. And these are the pronouns we learned. So now take a minute and do these examples. If you wanted to say those are his, it would be sa kanya yan. Sa kanya yan. Number 2, these are ours. Exclusive would just be sa amin ito. Sa amin ito. So we are just following that sentence structure, pronoun, then the demonstrative pronoun. Number 3, that's not yours. Plural is hindi sa inyo yan. Hindi sa inyo yan. So you just add the word hindi at the beginning to mean not. Okay, so let's just do a quick recap. We learned so much in today's episode. We learned the different types of possessive pronouns. Certain pronouns can go at the beginning of the sentence, and some do not ever go at the beginning, so remember to keep track of that. We also learned the different sentence structures and how to use the possessive sentence markers and demonstrative pronouns throughout these sentences. We also learned how to use English throughout these phrases if we don't know the word in Tagalog. And then we did lots of practice questions throughout the lesson, which I hope will help you understand some of these concepts. Now, let's go back to these phrases that we learned at the beginning. I want you, for your homework, to try and translate them, and I will put the answers in the video description. And then you can go over it. If you have any questions, feel free to write them in the comments. And if you need some more Tagalog resources, please feel